Hey, I'm Tom Rockwell. I'm here in the Shogun Audio studio, beautiful little location, and I'm basically going to talk today about how I made the break for my tune Aria. Basically, specifically going to concentrate on the 16 before the breakdown because I think that's where the majority of the most interesting percussion is in the tune. I'm basically going to go through the samples that I used, how I processed them and twisted them up, and then basically how I built the groove. Basically the concept of the track was quite an organic sounding tune, so I didn't want to process and limit too much, so I've left a lot of the tracks quite dry. But basically the starting point for me would probably have been getting a groove with the kick drums. It's not a traditional two-step drum and bass tune. It kind of sounds it's quite garagey, maybe quite techno-y, maybe. So I mean, the break pattern in itself is quite individual, and I basically, the first thing I did, I can remember, was I laid down a little kick drum groove. So basically, if I just start with the first one, I've used, basically for the foundation of the groove, I've used 3 different samples. The first one is just a big thick one on the first beat of the bar. That just sort of gives a bit of significance to the first beat of the bar, basically. That's all really it is. And then the second kick drum, which is just a straight 909 kick. Hear the groove starting to come through already. And then the third one is, I think it's the same 909 kick, but I've just shortened it a little bit so there was no clipping or anything as it went into the second, as it would go as it would go through the bars. So basically that's your kick drum groove. The big thick kick at the start of the bar. The only thing I've got on the channel is a EQ, regular Logic channel EQ, quite a large 5 decibel boost at 80 Hz. So that just kind of just brings out the bottom in it, so it's just a big stamp at the start of every bar. Got that bust to a compressor, standard Logic compressor. You can just hear the difference when I take it off. That's with, that's without. So basically what you're doing is just compressing it a little bit, and bringing the transients up so you can hear a lot more of the high. That's with, that's without. Just basically just makes it a little bit more snappy. It just kicks through the mix a little bit more. Basically the only kick out of the 3 I've got going to any sort of processing is the big thick kick at the start of the bar. I mean, every track that I write is different. This one basically you didn't really need to have a massive, every sound didn't have to be a big crushing sound. It just kind of had helped carry the groove, just have a few more kicks, and kicks of different timbres as well, just made it a little bit more interesting. I mean, you've got the big thick one going to the bus with the compressor, and then the other 2 just going in literally no EQ, no processing, straight to the output. So yeah, that's just basically, that's how I've got the kick drum loop ready. And then once I've got the kick drum groove sort of together, that's when I kind of basically wanted to put some other stuff and layer the kick with a couple of sounds to make the kick sound a little bit more individual. So if we concentrate on the first kick again, which is the big thick kick at the start of the bar, that's the kick just on its own, and then I layered it with, it's basically a sound that I dug from somewhere, I think it from BBC Radiophonic library. This is like the sample in its entirety. And it was just, I don't know, I found that and it was nice. It had some really nice resonances, really nice timbres, which is kind of what I look for when I'm finding my percussion samples. And then basically I rexed it in Recycle, and then I sent it to the ESX24 Logic sampler. Got the MIDI file, so it's just basically just the one stab for this one. I haven't used a filter at all. basically got a bit of, took the sustain down on the envelope, nothing really special going on there, it's pretty much standard sort of setting. And then I gated it, the noise gate, and also did some quite crazy EQing by the looks of things. Because if you can recall back to when I played the original sample, it was quite low in volume. So I've gained it up in the EQ by 7.5 decibels, which you can see, and then basically also really brought the high ends out. And also, as you can see, I've got quite a violent spike at around 1300 Hertz to take away anything that was going to be too harsh in the mix. Anything sort of frequency-wise in that sort of realm. I mean, I've got the EQ set up as a frequency analyzer as well, which is just another thing you can do in Logic. You can see the waveform there of that sample. I'm getting quite a nice sort of nice high frequency on top of the kick as well, and that's where I've taken it out with the spike. It just helps to give a little bit more texture to quite a flat and synthetic sounding kick. So that's what I layered on top of the big start of the bar flat kick. And I've also, with sort of the following triplets, they're quite synthetic as well, because I was going for quite an organic vibe. I layered them with another sample from, I think it's from the same, it's basically another instance from the same sample from the Radiophonic Workshop library that I had. I've treated it in pretty much the same way, just taking the sustain down a little bit, not really used a filter or anything. EQ'd pretty violently again, because it's quite a quiet sample, gained it up, taken the highs off to take off any sort of unnecessary harshness. Gated it as well, just to sort of keep it clean. So then you've got, just helps give the kick drums a little bit more texture. And then the final bit of processing in the kind of kick drum group is another sample sent through the ESX24, which, if you're familiar with the track, you know on the first beat of the bar layered with the big thick kick, there's quite a bass sample which descends in pitch. So that's just layered again. Didn't have to do too much processing. If you're quite lucky, if you find samples that kind of fit together really nicely frequency wise, you don't really have to do too much processing, which is quite a nice way of doing things. I mean, you can make, well, you can't really make anything work all the time. It's just a question of you choosing the right samples, in my opinion, and then they'll work together with not too much forcing. So if you look at the channel, it's just basically the sample loaded into the ESX24, not used the filter to drive it a little bit to get the volume up, and then on the channel there's nothing. It's just completely dry, no EQing, and you can hear on the first beat of the bar, you hear the descending. Basically first beat of every four. And there's a little glitch in there as well, just to help the percussion move along. Helps it roll along. Just that little glitch on the offbeat. So that's your groove basically, that's the foundation of the track. That's what I've made first, and then I just like the roll of it. Couldn't leave it as it is, obviously, because it would just be nonsense. Next thing I did was I've made a little delve into a couple of sample folders, get some hits out. I'm not really one for using breaks. I like using hits because I think you can get a more you can build your break from scratch and you can get the individual sound you're looking for. Going to move on to like sort of the claps that I've used and stuff like that. Yeah, all pretty sort of standard hits. I mean, it's not really of the opinion, it's not really like what you use, it's how you use it, and it's all about really the end result. So these are just pretty standard. If we go from this one here, standard wood block noise, gained up quite violently again, both on the Logic gainer, which is the standard plug-in, also the channel EQ as well. Put the analyzer on. there's not a lot of bottom end going on in there, so I've helped just gained it up quite violently again, just to try and get a bit of bottom in there, bring out some of the resonances. That's apart from the gain and the channel EQ, again, not really much processing, just kind of left it as it is. To get a variety of different textures on the percussion, I could have just banged the track through and just used one hit, but I've just went and just got a variety of different sort of textures. So we've heard the first one, that's the second, same sort of thing again, it's quite a quiet sample, gained it up, put a little tiny bit of reverb on there, only like but just over half a second, EQ after the reverb, just basically, because if you look at it, just to kind of bring out a few bit of the bottom on the hit, get a nice sort of chunky sound. I think limiters have its place. I do use a lot of limiters. I use a lot of limiters in sort of tracks that I did, like DJ Friendly Unit Shifter, Full Circle. If I really want to get that loud, aggressive vibe, I'll use a limiter. With this, I kind of wanted to let it breathe. I didn't really want to squash anything. So even though I'm gaining it the hell out of everything, and it's all up at +6 on the channel, it's all going through at +6, it's probably a completely wrong way to do it, but at the end of the day it doesn't really matter if what comes out sounds good as far as I'm concerned. And then you can see basically it just goes through the master, and I've taken the master right down, so you probably wouldn't need to gain it that much if the master was at 0, but I just keep gaining and keep bringing it down, and you get a little bit less of a kind of little bit less squashed, and I don't know, it's quite a chunky track, and the way the percussion sits, it's all hitting in triplets at the same time, so you kind of really didn't need to do a lot of the limiting. Now I've got the kick drum groove, and you've got 2 of the claps. You can hear the from the groove. You can hear that the wood blocks do pretty much sit right on top of the kicks. In both instances, they're all sitting on top of the kicks. So it's just basically just keeping it big chunky triplets, which is kind of different, but kind of worked with this track. And then got another one here, which is basically very little processing, just a compressor. Just here, just basically just compressed it a little bit again, just to bring out. Doesn't really do pretty much, does nothing, just brings out the transients a little bit more, it's a little bit more snappy. Got one more, I think. Basically, kept these the same. So we've got and again, everything's just sitting on the kick. It's not something I do with every tune, as I said. It's basically just a different vibe I was trying, as per usual, and it just kind of worked. So bring these 2 in, which are going to come in on the second bar, and that's just regular sample. Again, very little processing. You've just got a bit of a boost, quite a wide boost over the bottom end, so you can bring the bottoms out. It's quite a violent one, but I've got two samples layered to sort of bring out the claps on the second bar. That's the first, it's quite bottomy. This is a dry, really toppy, so you've kind of got everything kind of filled. Yeah, it just kind of works, I don't know. Not really much else to say from that. And we've got another sample here, and that's quite a low sort of reverb conga. Done a little bit more to this one to kind of bring it out. Very little EQing, just a little boost over 1,000. Gained it up a lot again. Pressed it a little bit, sort of bring out the transients. And I've also got the envelope on it to bring out transients even more. So it sits on top of the fat kick on the start of the second bar. So it's basically not really trying to force anything through, just trying to keep the track was basically built around a vibe. It was quite deep, so it didn't really need to be a dance floor smasher. It just needed to kind of just keep the vibe rolling along. I think I've got a couple more bits and kind of clap group. got this one here. Let's have a look. Yeah, again, very little. It's kind of a very little processing again, but I think it's got a different resonance to it again. Again, sat right on a kick. Got more kind of a watery. It's kind of got a watery like. Then that's 3 samples just laid together. First one, quite a woody ride. Again, gained up a little bit, only by 2 decibels on the EQ, but then brought the bottom out a little bit more, if you can see. It's quite a flat sounding sample, so it needs a bit more bottom. Second one, that's your kind of quite a watery sounding sample. Again, brought the bottom out. You can see it's quite toppy. Just brought the bottoms out. Bust this to a little compressor again. And just bringing out the transients a little bit, and then this is the EQ on the bus. Again, bringing more of the bottoms out. Just a little dip there at 4,000. Apart from that, the only other bit in the clip group is this little bit here. Again, sitting directly on top of a kick, and also layered with the watery sound just covered. Which is basically this sample, which is just some kind of weird reverb snare, quite metally, not too much top going on. Sending it through channel EQ, and then like standard cheap Logic reverb, not too much going on. Only sort of like 20% mix. And then layered with the first sound we just covered is another sound there. Same sort of vibe. I think probably used these doing the same sort of same curves on the EQ. It's basically it's basically the same kind of sample, but a lot more of a high frequency version. So you've kind of got the low one that we've covered before, and then the high one sitting on top just to fill up the gaps. That's without the processing. Really high top endy. That's with the EQ and the Averb. Dusted it up a little bit, brought the tail up a little bit more. So that's all the clicks, and then basically it's not like, I mean, they're all pretty standard clicks you can probably find in any sample pack. It's not really what you use, it's where they were put in relation to the groove, which is kind of something that I can't really say like this is how you make the groove, because it's always different. It's a lot of trial and error, and a lot of just trying things in different places and see what happens basically, and seeing if you can build something out of it that, I don't know, it's kind of different from what's been done before. So we've covered the bass, we've covered the clicks, and now you've kind of got a groove like this. There's still a lot of gaps. Well, a lot of people probably wouldn't think there's a lot of gaps, but when I look at that, I think, yeah, I can get more in there. So that's when we'll start bringing in a lot of the weirder percussion that I like to use, which is kind of what makes this passage in the tune interesting, in my opinion. We'll start from here. This is the sample. I named it Clock Winding, and because it's an antique, I think, grandfather clock being wound up. And what I've done is I've sent it to recycle, I've chopped it up hit by hit, imported it back into the ESX24 slice by slice. You'll have each slice on a key on the keyboard, and then you can basically manipulate it through the MIDI. So that's the MIDI file that I've chosen. Just select each one of these, you're going to hear a different. So it's quite it's what I think is quite a nice little bit of individual percussion. It's quite odd, but it kind of fits with the vibe of the track. If you look how the you look how the blocks are placed, they're not really quantized on any sort of regular quantization. I think basically that might have just been like that when I imported the Rex file, so just to kind of keep the groove. You can hear it with the kicks. So you can just kind of hear it here. So it's just like a little, I don't know, kind of little bit of percussion that I'll throw in just to kind of connect the dots between the groove. Got a next sample in the sort of, it's what I like to call like the glitch group, even though it's not very glitchy, it's just kind of the little bits that I like to throw in. Got some, this is the sample, dry. If you listen through, little music box kind of vibe. Wasn't really into the melodic part of the sample, but if you go back to the start, that's nice. Lots of clicks. None of them are the same, which is something I always look for as well, because you can't, if you layer the same sounding sample too much, it just sound really boring. You don't really get any movement in the percussion. So that's perfect for me. That's the kind of thing that I get excited about. So then basically, if you could just sit here, I've got it on the Logic window. I haven't imported it, haven't rexed it. I've just kind of got it sat. It's kind of, it's not really even really quantized. It's just kind of sat where it is. It's kind of sits on the first hit of this kind of music box sample. It hits with the kick. The other two just kind of linger. I mean, it's not necessary to have everything all the time perfectly on the beat. It doesn't really, that doesn't really interest me. It's kind of when it throws it off, that's kind of what I'm into, and that's kind of what I built this track around. But that's just the kind of trial and everything. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So basically, you know, you've got the kicks, and you've got the claps, and you've got the music box sample, and you've got the clock sample. It sounds something like this. Not too much processing on this actually as well, I should add. Well, no. I seem to have gained it by 20 decibels, but as you heard when I played the sample before, it's a very quiet sample, so to kind of bring it up, you've got to gain it. Other than that, just a little peak that's at 1200, just to bring out the relevant frequency to make it clear in the mix. And this is the music box and the clocks sample together with the claps and the kicks. So already you've got like a couple of little sort of interesting things which are kind of adding to the groove. I just chance upon things. A lot of the stuff that I use, I get from like sort of, they're like sample packs that are used for films, and you use them for kind of like background noise, and stuff like you get people chatting in cafes, and you get like people making coffees and stuff, and like basically setting up a field mic next to some guy making a coffee or whatever. And I listen to stuff like that, and you can hear like rhythmical movements. And from like a 3-minute recording, you may just take like the tiniest slice. But I find that really interesting because it's the kind of the contrast between the rigidly quantized beats and the natural movement, especially in a tune like this, is like what I think it makes it really special and really different to listen to. So I mean, you can, I've done it myself where I've just sat there with a mic and I've recorded things like shaking a cutlery drawer, banging little stones together or whatever. But this is, I don't know, I think Sony do some pretty good sample packs where there's just like background noise and loads of different stuff. So yeah, just check those out. I mean, a lot of the stuff where I think I get my samples from, I mean, people probably would listen to it and go, you know what, there's nothing there that I can use. But I listen to it and I think, yeah, I like that. That guy making a coffee, he's done it in a wicked way, and I'm just going to cut it up. And I don't know, maybe I just think I look at things maybe a little bit differently to everyone else who kind of makes drum and bass. But that's kind of where I get some of my samples from. Obviously it differs from tune to tune. This is just, I think, just the regular samples, a bit of a poppy one. Nice resonance, nice kind of timbre to it, kind of fits the overall palette of the tune. So I've obviously thrown that in just to kind of move the groove along as well. Not EQ'd it in the slightest, just used the Logic compressor again, just to bring out a bit of the transient. So this is the sound here. You can see where I've positioned it. This time it's not actually sat on a kick, it's sat just before the kind of watery sound. So I'll just do a little bit of muting, soloing and all that stuff. And it basically, all this sound does is lead into the watery sounds. And that's really nice. It's nice on its own. That's extra nice as far as I'm concerned. It's a nice little sample. Quite odd sounding. Fits with the organic nature of the track. Take the vocal up for a second. So it just fills in the gaps of the groove. Again, not much processing. Taking the bottom out of this because it's 2 kicks there. We're looking at this kind of area. It's kind of sat hitting with the first kick, but then you've got the second one hitting there, which is kind of hitting there. So took the bottom out, exaggerated the top to bring out nice highs in the mix. You can just hear it hitting at the end of the bar. And then layered with that, I've got some weird sample. I think that might be from a break. Can't remember what break, I'm rubbish from all breaks. But yeah, it's just a nice little different bit of texture to put in there. So yeah, it's just basically just finding different samples and just seeing if they work. And we've got another one here. Couldn't tell you how that was made. I don't know where I got it from, but beautiful. You can see actually I've done this. I've taken out some of the waveform manually to kind of give it a little bit of space in between the hits. So it just rolls along nicely. If you look how I've EQ'd it, that's it dry, and that's it with the EQ. Real different. Quite a steep EQ curve. That's dry, EQ'd. If you look at the EQ curve, getting pretty steep towards the top. Just to bring up this part of the sample. Nice high bit. Taking the bottom out a little bit. Don't really like low cutting at the bottom too much, so I just tend to use the low shelf, I think it's called. I'm not entirely sure, but it's nice to have a little something. And then another sample, just the whole sample. So yeah, again, quite a weird little sort of. It's not something that maybe you listen to and think, yeah, I can make a tune out of that, but you can hear rhythm in there, and it's not an instrument, but it's quite natural in the way it flows. I mean, I haven't taken too much of it. You look, I've just taken that just kind of sits with the groove. Again, I've used a fat EQ on this just to gain it more than anything. A little sort of roll off on the bottom. And I think this is the last sample. And this is just some, as you can tell by the waveform, but it makes a lovely noise. I think it's just basically a bit of distortion. So it's just pretty random. If you look at the waveform here, it's not really doing a lot, but it's just a bit of distortion. And with this, I've put a little spread on it between 500 and 10, well, no, about 500 and 5,000 rolled off the bottom just so it didn't conflict with anything. So then for the first part, I think, yeah, for the first sort of 3 bars covered, and now we've got the end fill, which probably going to need a bit of attention, which sounds like this. Right, first part of this, quite a nice sounding, staticky, but it's nice because it's pitched, and I like that. makes this kind of different textures. And there's a lot of processing on this. This was either a moment of madness or a moment of clarity. You can decide. Basically, it is a sample of Rexed, so that's it. That's it dry. Just the 3 notes in the MIDI roll. Because they're quite dull. First, there's channel EQ, ridiculously, wow, what was I doing there? Ridiculously steep curve. You can hear the difference. The sample's really quiet. Probably something that you wouldn't even listen for, but I liked it. You can hear there's quite a lot going on, so channel EQ to bring out highs. Oh, noise gate to kind of make it a little bit more staccato, put little gaps in between each note to kind of make it stand out a little bit more. Again, that's the noise gate. Then you've got the enveloper, which is here. And you can see I've gained the attack a little bit, so that, I mean, you can hear the difference. Just to bring the attack out a little bit, so it's a little bit more cutting. Then I've distorted it. Driven it by 6, or that pretty standard setting. Now I've bit crushed it. Make it a little bit dirtier. Finally, I've compressed it. So that takes you for this bit, and that's the noise. And then that's the other part of the fiddle. I think it's just basically a track with loads of different glitches on that I've rexed. That's the song. It's just loads of different hits that I've rexed. Sent to the ESX24, and on the MIDI roll, that's the rest of them. Those ones I've used. Not used the filter, not used really the envelope at all, just kind of left it dry. Then the effects chain, compressed it. You see very little, no side chain or anything. Just bring out the transients. The fat EQ, which has been just used just to gain it basically. By 3, that's what I used it for. And then last hit in the fill, it's just 1 hit. So those, yeah, not really a lot going on. Same track as the previous one we discussed. There's it on piano roll. Just gain a little bit because it's quite quiet. Obviously I've used that. It's pretty much the same track as the last one we covered, but I've used the gain instead of the fat EQ to gain it up. And compressor used as a little bit of just to sort of bring up the happiness of it. You're probably going through it thinking what the hell's going on, but it's, again, when you listen to the parts on their own, it doesn't really make a lot of sense, but you kind of put it all together and it kind of rolls and it fits together. Got the kicks, the kick groove. So yeah, that's building one break using a hell of a lot of different elements. Pretty minimal processing. Last little bit is, if you look at the way the project's arranged, actually kind of goes through by frequency. You've got kicks at the bottom, crash in the middle, snares at the top, and these little blue bits at the top, that's the kind of stuff which fills up the higher frequencies of the tune, the break. So the first thing I've got is just some virtually white noise, little bit of a tone in there. It's coming from the ESX sampler. It's got quite a sidechained vibe to it, but in this instance I haven't sidechanged it. I've just basically started a new instance at the start of the bar. You can use a sidechain, and if you wanted to, I haven't done that, although I sometimes do. Processing wise, use the filter to drive it a little bit, not use the envelopes or anything else, and the LFOs. And then we've got the Logic Platinum Verb, quite a long reverb time, like 3 seconds. And then channel EQ just to bring out the tops. So if we take off the processing, sounds like that. There's the reverb, you can just hear that. And then the EQ makes a more drastic change because it brings out the tops in the sample. And then this is, let's play it through, a little squeaky kind of, almost shaker kind of percussion-y instrument that was made by me in a program called Camel Space. Basically it was just a sample that I gated the hell out of until it was quite rhythmic. Yep, this is the sample. It's the sample in its entirety. It's quite an odd little thing. Basically I think it was a pad that I gated with quite a lot of resonance on the gate. So it kind of, that's where you get these little snappy kind of watery kick movements from. You can hear the beginnings and the ends of the pad, and then you can hear I've gated it. Because the pad was kind of modulating, well, it's kind of moving in pitch, I get different pitches on the different bits that have been gated, so that's lovely. I've then rexed that, stuck it into ESX24, so you've got different bits on the piano roll. There's the different hits. Nice different sort of texture on each of them, so kind of makes a kind of rhythmic element of it, not really static and boring. I haven't EQ'd it at all, gained it up by 24, which is quite a lot. The last little bit of the break I'm going to go through is this bit, which you can just hear. This pretty much, I'll turn it up so you can hear it. It's like a really dull shaker, almost white noisy, and that is from, again, Logic sampler. This is a break I've rexed, and this is the break in its entirety. So then I've rexed that, put it back into the sampler, got it on the piano roll, these lovely little white noisy shakers. And then basically all I've done, I've used the low pass a little bit on the filter on the ESX24. I've driven the hell out of it, and then I've used the EQ. So if you kind of take the filter off and the EQ off, it sounds virtually inaudible. Just hear it really quietly. Turn the filter on, just takes the top off, and the EQ in, gain it up by a lot. Just kind of see it there. But yeah, I mean, these little things, these little sort of like white noise shakers, they don't really play like, well, they do play an important part in the track, especially in a track like this, and you can't really hear them, but they're there and they help everything move along. It's just that, especially you've kind of got the high shaker, like the squeaky one that I made in Camel Space, and then this will kind of sit down here. So it's pretty much inaudible, but it does give the track a little bit more movement. So then that's pretty much your entire break. probably more percussion tracks than the average person, well, say most people would use on a track. But it's kind of the way I do things, it's kind of the way I get my sound. So I just go through the different sort of groups just to wrap things up. Got a kick groove, different kicks, different timbres layered with different things. Got the claps and clicks. Just different textures to keep it all sort of interesting. And then you got the sort of fills. Then if you bring in topics, hitting the squeaks. Can't hear the little white noise shakers when they're there, they're doing their thing. And then this is the white noise. Sucking out over the kick. I think the last thing to mention really is, especially when you've got a lot of percussion going on, if we get rid of the claps and kicks, it can get quite cluttered and you've got to be quite careful about where you place things, especially with sort of something like this. You can see it's not really a regular pattern, it's like that would be kind of like a regular sort of cymbal or ride pattern in just like a normal two-step tune, and that just repeat and it wouldn't really matter. But you can see I've taken bits out and it's kind of irregular, but it works with the percussion in the yellow section that I put in. So if you can just see, so there's just like there's little instances of the squeak missing from where there's parts in the percussion, and it kind of interferes with each other. So that's quite a painstaking job, but it's just, I'm not sure how to describe it. It's just basically just listening to something a lot and fine-tuning it and fine-tuning it and fine-tuning it and fine-tuning it, and then getting a sample, putting it in. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. And just basically honing it and honing it and honing it until you're happy with it and it's interesting. And yeah, just building and building until you've just got something there. A lot of other people will just chop a few breaks and then they'll have their kick and they'll put it in, but I've never really been about that. I'm more about sort of just building something a little bit different, and I think that's what I was trying to achieve with this track, and I think it turned out really well. I'm really happy with it. Sometimes if I'm making a tune that I want to sound a really big sort of danceful thing, I'll bust the kick and the drum separately, and then I'll kind of bust into groups, like I'll have all the percussion on a bus, maybe limited, maybe not. It all depends on like the kind of sound I'm trying to get. But with this I've kind of just left them all just hitting the master and not really going into a bus. I mean, I've got certain little groups like the sort of watery sound is bussed together to sort of it's kind of, if you've got 3 samples for that one, I've bust them and I've compressed it to kind of stick them together, so you kind of get a whole. But then if you look at the rest of the mixer, you know, I've bust that just to a compressor, and then everything else is just going straight to the master. Not a lot of bussing at all. I mean, it was a track that well, as I said before, it's very organic in its feel, and it didn't need to be pushed and limited and squashed to bits just in order to get it loud as possible. It was just it was what it was in essence, and I'm really pleased with the way it worked out. And yeah, everything I kind of approach is always a little bit different from the last thing. It's like at the moment I'm kind of going through a bit of a phase where I'm trying to like sort of kind of push myself to write dance floor stuff, and I'm also writing really weird stuff at the same time, and the approach to different tunes is really, really different. But it's something that I enjoy with my production, because doing the same thing over and over again would just bore the hell out of me. I really like to push myself and try different things, and I think it's a good way to progress as a a producer, just to kind of get wide range of different skills and sort of different approaches to things. And it just kind of like, I don't know, just builds the whole thing into, I don't know, it just gives you more strength in the studio to sort of go about doing your thing. You don't have to limit to get your tune sounding really loud. It's just a question of, I don't know. I mean, it just goes into the master, and as you can see, there's the master. I've turned the master down by 10, and then I've gained everything up by a hell of a lot. A lot of the time, if I'll have something, a tune that I've done that I'm happy with, or a tune that someone else has done that I like the sound of, and I always have that in the background, just to sort of cross compare the loudness. Because if you don't do that, you can get into writing a tune, and you'll finish it, and you'll be like, yeah, this is wicked, it's absolutely ramping. Play it, and you'll be like, yeah, it's really cool. And you listen to something else, and suddenly that comes through the speaker, it's really loud. It's important all the way through, I think, when you're making a tune, to kind of have something there just to sort of A and B the loudness, so you don't really, because you can kind of like, you make a tune in a vacuum, and you don't really know how it sounds in comparison to anything else, and it could sound wicked, but you need to kind of have that comparison with the loudness, I think. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that, and it wasn't too boring. It was quite in depth, and yeah,